I've never wanted to cause mischief or pull pranks because I've always told not to and to follow the rules. Well, recently, within the last few years, my family has started to tell stories about what I was like when I was little and tell me stories about what they were like and some of their past experiences. So from hearing these stories, I've learned something about my family that I never even thought that was possible. My family, as a whole, they were troublemakers. This first story is from my father. He's not only my dad, but my best friend. I don't know what I'd do without him. And I'm honestly not surprised that he decided to tell this story because he loves telling it, and I guess it just reminds me of his glory days in college.
In the spring of 1994, my fraternity brothers and I sat around and decided to put a prank together for the brand new fountain that had just been finished in front of the library. Our idea was to make foam shoot out of the fountain. So four of us had decided to put Dawn liquid detergent in our backpacks. We were going to ride our bikes over to the fountain and dump it all in it. So we loaded up on our bikes and rode over there, and we sat down and squirted all 12 gallons of detergent into the fountain. Nothing happened at that moment, but when we returned to go to class the next morning, there was 4 feet of white foam rolling over the edges of the fountains. The frogs that normally shoot water out was shooting foam. The Ball State maintenance crew was there hosing it off, and as they were hosing it, the foam got thicker. We made it on the front page of the paper, and nobody ever knew who did it. We kept our mouths shut.
The next two stories are told by my mom's father. We call him Pop Pop. He is probably the smartest and brightest person I've ever met. He was a Marine and did 2 tours in Vietnam. I have the utmost respect for him. Him and I have the exact same sense of humor, so he decided to tell these 2 stories because he knows that I always laugh. He's not known to be the prankster and cause trouble, but he really is.
This is a story about your grandfather, in a story that happened about 25 years ago, before you were born. We were celebrating Thanksgiving at your grandmother's house, and we were in the family room watching football games, and my father-in-law went and got a rifle that he had put away, brought it in, and handed it to me, and was talking about giving that to me. My son Chris, who at that time would have been probably a teenager. Yeah, probably. Anyway, my background was 4 years in the Marine Corps. I won an expert shooting medal for marksmanship, and had handled weapons with 2 tours in Vietnam, and felt very comfortable with the weapon. But just to prove anything can happen to anybody, my father-in-law handed it to me, and so to be extra cautious, I checked the weapon. It was a 22 rifle, and I checked the weapon, and the procedure in doing that is to eject any bullet in the chamber. So I pulled back the eject on it and let it go forward. And then, as is always done, on caution, knowing that it was empty because no bullet came out, I pulled the trigger. Unfortunately, the bullet that was in the chamber had not come out when I attempted to eject it. The weapon went off, and much to my embarrassment, I shot a hole through my mother and father-in-law's ceiling. The round went on through the ceiling, on through the roof, and the jokes that have ensued since then in the last 25, 30 years, probably 30 years ago that this happened, still continue. My father-in-law was in the Navy, and he thought it was quite funny that an experienced Marine would sit in his living room and fire a weapon This particular circumstance was one of when I was a senior in high school, and being like a lot of 18-year-old guys, not using the best of judgment. A friend of mine thought it would be very funny for a teacher that we had for government class at that time, that he had a routine that was just repeated every day for class, and that he would stand outside the door and wait until each student had come in the door, and then he would come in and slam the door to let us know that the class was starting. That was his notification. My friend and I, what we thought would be funny is to sneak down before our class and remove the bolts that go in the hinges. So we removed the three metal bolts that go into the hinges, and as usual, came to class. Everybody filed in. We're all in and waiting, and the teacher should remain nameless, but at any rate, he did his normal routine of grabbing a hold of the door and jerking it shut. Well, when he did, the door flew off the hinges. And the bad part of the story is that, not thinking about it, which at 18 I didn't think a lot back then, apparently, the door fell, and it was a solid wood door that probably weighed about 80 pounds. Fortunately, did not hit the first student next to the door, barely missed her, and did barely miss the teacher, but the door collapsed completely in the middle of the floor. And for whatever reason, the first thing that this teacher said was he stand and looked across the room, and he was very, very angry. And for whatever reason, he looked straight at me and called me by name and said, "Did you have anything to do with this?" And I've always been totally honest, so I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "That's all I need to hear. Who's with you?" And I said, "I can't say that." And I was sent immediately to the principal's office, was disciplined, spent a couple of nights in, what's the class
Detention.
Yeah, detention. I was in detention for a couple of 3 nights. Never did rat on my friend that helped me, and this whole story was related at our 50th high school class reunion a few years ago, and since then has become rather well known throughout the class, and everyone seemed to know, even though that was only one government class and he had 4 of them.
The final story is from my dad's mom, Maman. She is the perfect representation of what anybody would think of as sweet old grandma. She's the nicest person I know, and she'd give you the shirt off her back, no questions asked. She has had some rough patches in her life, especially when my grandpa died. But she powered through it, the hardship, and that is one of the things that I admire most about her.
Hi, Blake. I have a story to tell you. Many years ago, when your dad was young, we used to go to Tennessee for Thanksgiving. The guys all went out to play pool because it was getting late. They all went out to play pool, and my sister gave us beds to sleep. So she gave me and your grandpa her bed. And it was late when the guys came in, and we was in bed, and my brother-in-law, which is a preacher, came in the bedroom thinking his wife was in the bed but it was me instead. And I never said a word. I had my head covered up, and he didn't turn on the light. So he sat down on the side of the bed, and he took off his shoes, and then he stood up, and I heard the zipper on his breeches go down, and he bent over to take his pants off, and there he was. His white tighties were sticking straight up in the air, and I never said a word. So he bent down to pull him all the way down to his ankle, and finally I said, "Dennis, what are you doing?" And he said, oh, sis, what are you doing in here?" And I said, "I'm sleeping. You need to go find your wife."
To conclude, I guess I never realized how much fun and all the things that my family's done over the years. I really enjoyed listening to these stories, and it made me realize that I have to step up my game in order to be able to tell my kids and grandkids stories like these, to be able to pass them on.